Hi, I'm Jason, and today I'm going to be talking about Bitcoin. Now, I know I've talked about Bitcoin a lot, but today was one I just want to kind of talk about more of a in-detailed idea that I had about Bitcoin. Now, right now, a lot of people are using it as a currency, and they're using it to trade currencies. For instance, if I have an American dollar and I have the euro, I can use Bitcoin to transfer between the two currencies. Also, people are using it as a way, to buy things. I know there's people in stores in New York, and I think there's even a couple of hotels in New York and San Francisco, and areas of large population densities that accept them as a payment. The thing about this is the problem is the people have to pay the rent and everything in Bitcoin. I mean, not in. I wish in U.S. dollar. So if I have Bitcoin and it's, say, the current exchange, whatever the current exchange is, equal to the dollar amount it's worth to go to the same place, they have to either, the company has to take that money, and they have to get the US dollar for it. So they're basically, imagine this is a trade network. They have the Bitcoin, goes through, comes out, and they have to get the US dollar instantaneously. And the problem is, with the, basically, Bitcoin goes, prices go up and down so quickly. So I was thinking, it's a great currency. It's very, as a currency, it's unstable compared to the rest of the currencies. If you look at the American dollar to the European or the Chinese yuan, you'll notice the prices stay pretty steady. I mean, they go up and down, but they don't go dramatically up and down like you see Bitcoin. And, you could argue it's different points, but that just kind of makes it hard for people to get in. But one thing I was thinking about, and I think this is where Bitcoin succeeds in many areas that other things don't, is to look at Bitcoin as a trading platform, a international one trading platform. I think one of the biggest things we see is you have, the New York Stock Exchange, and all these trading platforms. And, people trade, but if anyone's ever done research on stocks and everything, you'll know you need a pretty large sum of money, probably up, I'd say, at least 5,000 just to, to make money because of the transaction fees. You pay, $7 a trade, the in and out, and if you're doing day trading, it costs a lot more now if you're doing, long-term trading, maybe like a 6-month to a year to, 10-year or whatever. You're looking at, $7 trade might not do you too bad, but, you have to have so much money left in your account, you want to take money out, and it gets to where the fees almost sometimes overweigh the monetary amount you're putting in, unless it's, a derivative of, 5,000 plus. And the idea that I thought about was with Bitcoin, the idea that you can have a currency exchange, but it's also this environment where you can trade, almost like stocks, but it's one stock that's being traded like a currency exchange. And of course, trading, there are risks, but one thing that Bitcoin has going for it is the ability to make profit on very little amount of money. If you go to MountGoxLive.com, Mt. Gox holds like 90% of all Bitcoin transactions. That's not done peer-to-peer on the Bitcoin network. It's traded, for U.S. currency to Bitcoin back and forth, and all currencies are traded to Bitcoin. And it's really revolutionary. But one of the things that's interesting, and if you look around, you watch, and it pops up all the transactions going off to the side. It's really interesting, because you'll notice most people trade less than 5 Bitcoins. Now, of course, you have the exception to someone trading 40 or 50, 200, 500. But normally, it's under 10 Bitcoin, 5, 10 Bitcoins. So if you compare that, at current exchange rate, it's $1 equals like 5 Bitcoin. No, I'm saying that wrong. Bitcoin's at like $4.99 right now. Of course, it's going up and down all day. But so sorry, I'm like trying to run the idea in my head and what the current exchange price is. But the thing is you have a currency that moves up and down, kind of like a stock trade. If you compare it to stocks, and you can compare the charts and everything, but you notice that it acts very similar to trading in the stock market. You have ups and downs all day, and this is an interesting topic. I mean, the idea that someone could, $10, or say 10 Bitcoins, that's $50. Sometimes I even see transactions. Most commonly, this is actually somewhat common, which questions me, but you'll have transactions of like 0.5 bitcoins. So I mean, it would be like $2.50 at current exchange rates. See, I got that right. I did the math in my head while I was talking, so I figured it out. Current exchange rate to American dollar. So you know, you have this monetary amount you can put in. So let's say, for instance, one night, and I've done research on this. I wish I had it here right now. One night I spent like 4 hours. I know, long time, and I had written out monetary amounts that you'd put into Bitcoin, and then per amount of money, how much the margin of increase would have to be to make a profit, and how much profit you would make. And I actually did a whole study on it, and this is kind of for my own. I love doing numbers or anything, but I figured it out because I said, what if I could, you know, make some money, put it in Bitcoin, and use it, and basically be like a job, because you know, I do day trading. I figured it out. Still working on that, you know, trying to learn the ropes. I've been at this since end of November, so about 3-4 months now. But it's really interesting, and it's something that I think more people should get interested in. You know, trying to convince people to use Bitcoin as a currency, it's iffy. I mean, it's a great idea. Don't get me wrong. It's iffy, and but because, you know, people say, well, and you know, I use Darwa to get money into Bitcoin. You know, from my bank account to Darwa. I know I say it wrong. I don't think it's called Darwa, but you know, and then to Mt. Gox to trade for Bitcoin. But and Darwa has come up with this. I'm saying it wrong, I know, but please ignore that. Maybe I am saying it right. That'd be kind of funny. But they're taking the money, and they come up with this new, I think, where merchants can have money. And I think they are the idea of how currencies, not currencies, but, you know, money will be traded 3 or 4 years down the road. Bitcoin has more, in my eyes, more potential in a stock market type form than in a currency at its current state. 5, 6, 7, 10, 12 years down the road, it could very plausibly be a currency. It has to stable out. It has to get mass support for that to work. And it has to be considered legalized. You know, there are some legal issues, but it's pretty much, as of right now, legal. You know, there's, because it's compared to the debate of, is it a currency, is it gold, and getting onto that is a whole video unto itself. But standpoint, I'd consider it legal. It's perfectly legal. I mean, they'd stop it down if it wasn't, you know, die hard legal right now. So, you know, using it as a stock market can be good. Now, I gotta say, when you invest money, I mean, there's always winners and losers. Somebody always loses. But the idea that, you know, you have these miners, you know, you could produce a huge community of miners, which I have videos on my site, or I will have more videos on my YouTube account of how to mine and everything. But so you have these miners producing these Bitcoins, and they're putting the money into the system. And, you know, so you open up the potential. If you get a mass, you know, movement to use Bitcoin as an exchange, kind of like a stock exchange, because then you get a whole bunch more people doing mining, which brings the community together. But you bring this huge amount of people, because the thing is, people love to make money. You know, people aren't so much concerned. The average person, and no offense, but the average person, they don't care if there's a new currency. They have, I was looking to see if I have a dollar, but I don't have a dollar here. They have their currency, they're fine with it. But you give them ability to make money, it's a very open idea. The idea that, you know, I have a friend, I won't mention names, but he doesn't think Bitcoin's a good idea. And even when I tell him the money I've made with Bitcoin, still ignores it. You know, so you have some of those people that just don't want to believe in new ideas. They're more, I mean, he very inventive person. I mean, he's developed things in computer programs I could not yet imagine. But when you get into monetary things and money, it gets a little bit more tricky. But I think it's a great idea, and the idea that as a stock exchange. Now, I've said this many times, so let me explain how this would work. It works. See, the thing is you don't have to make it complicated. People, you know, with the stock exchange, you have to pay fees. You have to have all this stuff. You have to, you know, I trust me. I've looked into doing stocks. I mean, I have. I've done hours and weekends and weeks in the summer just filled with doing stock research. I could say I'm pretty good at knowing that. The thing is there's a large monetary amount of money needed to really invest. I've even talked to stockbrokers who want to charge $80, $90 a trade, which the amount of money I have wouldn't really be beneficial to me. So Bitcoin gives the average person the ability to trade money. If you want to mess around with $20, mess around with $20. I should do. I'm considering doing a strategy video of how to use very small amounts of monetary money and invest it right with Bitcoin. Now, of course, the more amount of money you have with Bitcoin, the more money it's worth. But this is a very plausible idea because here, let me pull up my phone here. Please excuse the time wait. So I have this app, and I don't want to know what it's called, but so the current Bitcoin is at 4.99. Okay, but you see this chart right here? This is a chart of the prices. The prices went up and down, like in the stock market. Now, let me pull the stock market over here. You want to see something different? Here's something that convinces me why Bitcoin's better than the stock market. Stock market's all going down. There's a couple ones that go up, but much of the major ones are down right now. Bitcoin keeps going up every day. Now, Bitcoin's not for the faint of heart, and I say this for one reason. After putting in small monetary amounts of $5, $10, $15, $20, $50 in, I went for the big game and I transferred $250. I transferred it one day when Bitcoin was at $4.90. 3 hours later, Bitcoin goes down to $4.50. Now, the thing is, most people would freak out and they'd sell, and they lose that money. 7 days later, my money's back up, and I've made, the prices went up 10 cents. It's a waiting game. Now, I look at Bitcoin as a long-term investment. Some people look at it, you can day trade. I day trade and I long-term investment. I do both, and I find it very interesting, very, very profitable. I mean, I tell people about Bitcoin, I'm like, oh, well, it's this really cool currency. They're like, no offense, but they're like, who gives a shit? Who cares? I have USR. But when I tell them, hey, look at all this chart information I made up. This is how much the average teenager makes an hour. What if you took this amount of money and you invested it? And here's the strategies I use. And you just have to watch. You have to watch the market. I've probably spent 20 days total. I mean, now, granted, I looked into the Bitcoin back in like January and February of like 2010, and it was kind of iffy, and I didn't really look into it. And now I wish I would have, because the profit, the money I would have made. The money I would have made. But what if that's now? Now, it's granted that you could look at, but think about Google stock. Google stock was at like $5 when it started. $500 now. What if Bitcoin becomes that? What if Bitcoin becomes an international stock exchange for one stock? It's this one stock, Bitcoin. And what if right now it's at $5? What if in 10 years this Bitcoin stock is at $600? It's just an option. Now, I know this video was kind of long, and thank you if you watched the whole video. I'm going to do more follow-up videos about doing the stock market, but I just wanted to give the idea that Bitcoin could be used as a stock market of sorts instead of a currency. Now, currency is still a good idea, but for the mass public to get involved in Bitcoin, to get it to its peak, to really spark up the community, to really get fresh blood into the community, you have to get something to draw them in. And what's better to get people in than the ability to make large amounts of money or just to have fun? Take $5, take $1, mess around with it for a weekend. Trust me, I have just for fun sometimes mess around with $5 or $10, messing around. I lost. Now I gotta warn you, you can lose money too. Stock market, you can lose money, but you can also gain money if you do it smart. So I would like to thank you for watching. Have a great day.